Okay, this video is for our first learning target for our first unit. Our first learning target is to be able to describe the difference between renewable and non-renewable energy resources, with also being able to describe how we generate electricity and where our fossil fuels come from, because this is one of our main non-renewable energy resources. So let's start with actually how we generate electricity. This is how we started in class. Um, so we looked at how a generator worked. I had a little generator in class that gave a little bit of a shock if you touched two panels while we were spinning the generator. And basically how it works is if you have a coil of wires inside of a magnet and you spin that coil of wires, you'll generate a current. We're not going to go into any of the physics about how or why this works. But basically all we need to know, if we can spin a coil of wires inside of a magnet, then we can generate electricity. And obviously the more wire you have, or the bigger magnet you have, or the faster you spin the wires, you can generate more electricity. So in everyday life, the main way that we do this is we have some sort of a heat source. We usually burn something like coal, and then we use that heat to boil water, and then the steam that's created from that boiled water is sent through a series of fans, which is called a turbine, and then the steam is recollected, and then that process continues. But the turbine is connected to a generator, and a generator is a large-scale version of what we were just looking at. So this diagram is kind of like the overall way it works. We've got some sort of a heat source, boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, make a generator, turn, and then that makes electricity. Because most of our electricity is from a heat source, there's some consequences from the thing that we have to burn in order to get that heat. So we try to generate electricity in other ways. So instead of burning something or using heat, we try to collect the motion of something that's already moving. So something like wind or water is pretty easy to collect the motion from. We can just get a fan and then connect it to a generator. So something like a windmill or a hydroelectric power plant is basically just step 2 and 3 without having to have a heat source. So this is how we make a lot of our electricity between these two methods. So after we talked about how we generate electricity, we talked about the difference between renewable and non-renewable. So non-renewable is something that takes a very long time to regenerate, or it's not able to be regenerated at all. It's also considered something in limited supply. Sorry, jumping around here. The renewable energy resources is something that's replenished in a short time. It's replenished in a short amount of time. Where people make mistakes is that they think it's reusable. They think renewable means reusable. It is not reusable energy. Once we use it, any energy we don't use is converted to heat. We don't collect that energy again and use it again. So renewable is replenished in a short amount of time. This diagram is a good diagram to kind of show what we use. So about 90% of the energy we used in 2013 was non-renewable. Most of it came from petroleum, but we had a lot of natural gas, coal, uranium, and a little bit of propane. For our renewables, mostly biomass, with some hydropower, wind, solar, and geothermal. So these are the breakdowns of our non-renewable and renewable energy resources. Okay, so we've answered the first two questions, the difference between renewable and non-renewable, and we've also explained how we, in general, generate electricity. The next thing we had to do was explain where fossil fuels came from. So the two main fossil fuels are there's actually, I guess, three, is coal, and then petroleum and natural gas, or oil and natural gas, kind of lumped together. So you could lump them as one or consider them two separate things, but we've got two different processes to make these two things. So let's start with coal. about 300 million years ago, there was a period of time on the Earth when plant material didn't really get decomposed or decayed. That's called the Carboniferous period. But anyway, when plants died, they didn't go away. They just stayed there. So eventually those dead plants got covered up by dirt, and more dirt and more dirt, and then the pressure over 300 million years compressed all of that plant material into a rock, and we call that coal. So it's a misconception that there's dinosaurs in coal. It's not anything that used to be an animal. It's all plant material. Petroleum and natural gas, on the other hand, are a little bit different. But the only way to get petroleum and natural gas is with oceans and tiny sea creatures. It's mostly sea plants, but technically sea animals are in there too. When those things died, they eventually sank to the bottom. They were covered with sand and silt, and they got compressed into a goo that we call oil, and the gas part of it became natural gas, which is also methane. So those are the two main categories for our natural gas, for fossil fuels. We have coal, petroleum, and natural gas. So that is it.